Production of recombinant pharmaceuticals. Okay, biopharmaceuticals is a term that refers to therapeutic products generated by technologies that involve living organisms. Production of recombinant pharmaceuticals means we will be using living organisms as well as recombinant DNA technology for the production of pharmaceuticals. So then in that case it will be called recombinant biopharmaceuticals. The first biopharmaceutical that was developed was Humulin. It was developed by Eli Lilly and Company in 70s, and it is nothing but recombinant human insulin, which was fabricated in bacterium E. coli. Okay, and this was the first approved recombinant biopharmaceutical by FDA in 1982. You already know that what are the recombinant systems that can be used for protein production, right? We have studied it in our previous lecture. Okay, so you already know that what are the hosts, what are the strategies that can be used for producing any recombinant protein in an organism. You see, there are many products in the market available which are recombinant biopharmaceuticals. There are interferon. In this figure, I have shown you different products already available. A few of them, actually, like Intron A, which is nothing but an interferon. Then this Recombivax, okay, which is a recombinant hepatitis B vaccine. Then Humulin, which we just knew that it was the first product in the market, right? And then we have Activase, which is a tissue plasminogen activator, and then we have Protropin. Okay, this is also a recombinant biopharmaceutical product. So this way we have a number of biopharmaceutical products which are recombinant in nature available in market. Okay, so as per a report in 2016, around by that time 650 protein drugs were worldwide approved, among which about 400 are obtained by recombinant technologies. Okay, so about 400 out of 650 were recombinant pharmaceutical, we can say. Okay, and about 1300 recombinant pharmaceuticals are under development with a clear tendency towards engineered versions with improved performance and new functionalities regarding the conventional plain protein species. Okay, now ex vivo recombinant protein production must guarantee not only full protein functionalities but also a cost-effective industrial fabrication and the absence of hazardous contaminants. Okay, we are talking about production of recombinant proteins, but that must guarantee that that the protein or any the product which is being produced is functional in once it is in use, and the production must be cost effective so that it can be produced at large scale to meet the needs of the people, okay, in a cost effective manner. And also it should not have any hazardous contaminant or any toxic material in it, okay, or any toxic component in it. So this must be assured by any protein production system. Okay, in this context of expanding protein drug market, there is a generic consensus about the need to enable drug for cell or tissue targeted delivery, okay, to reduce doses, production cost, and side effects. So the gist is that it should be targeting the cell or the tissue where the ailment is or where the problem is in a very specific manner. If it will be very specific, so we will need a reduced amount of the dose, which will reduce the production cost as well as the Side effects. These are some examples of recombinant biopharmaceuticals improved in as early as 1980s. If you see, Humulin approved in the year 1982. It was produced in E. coli and it was used for treatment of diabetes. Okay, and then there is a protropin, which we saw the the label also, right? It was also produced in the E. coli. It is again the protein drug, and it overcomes the HGH, human growth hormone deficiency. It was approved in 1985. Then there is referon A, intron A. So these are also again produced in E. coli and used for hairy cell leukemia and cancer and genital warts and hepatitis respectively. And then Recombivax was produced in Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and it is used for hepatitis B treatment. And now this orthoclone OKT3, this is a monoclonal antibody which is produced in hybridoma cell line, and it is used for reversal of acute kidney and transplant rejection. It was approved in 1986. And another HGH deficiency treatment, the drug for use for HGH deficiency is Humatrop. Okay, it was approved in 1987. Activase, which is an Epogen, these two were produced in Chinese hamster ovary cell lines, and these are used for treatment of acute myocardial infarction and anemia respectively. Okay, these are the details of these products. Like for Activase is a thrombolytic drug. Okay, that's why it is used for treatment of myocardial infarction and severe conditions where blood clotting is occurring, to break up the blood clots, and that causes this condition. And Epogen is nothing but human erythropoietin, and this was also produced by the recombinant DNA technology. So these were the biopharmaceuticals approved in very earlier times. That is, in about in all of them were approved before 1990. The top 10 selling protein biopharmaceuticals in 2014 are listed here. The Humira, Sovaldi, Remicade, Rituxan, Enbrel, Lantus, Avastin, Herceptin, Advair, Crestor. Okay, these were the top 10 selling biopharmaceuticals in 2014, and all are recombinant, in products produced in a recombinant manner, either in Chinese hamster ovary cell line or through hybridoma technology, or in E. coli, or some of them are of chemical origin also, like Sovaldi and Advair, and this Crestor one is a synthetic one. Okay, so we have among top 10 selling, about 7 are recombinant, right? So this tells you the significance of recombinant technology in pharmaceutical sector. These are some representative examples of supportive protein drugs, that two recombinant protein drugs used in cancer. Okay, because in cancer treatment, while chemotherapy and radiotherapy, people suffer depletion of blood cells, right? That is one of the side effects of the cancer treatments. Okay, so there are several drugs available to stimulate hematopoiesis, like filgrastim. Pegfilgrastim is there, Darbepoetin alpha is there, Lenograstim is there, Epoetin alpha is there. These are either produced in E. coli or Chinese hamster cell line. And what are their nature, biological role? They are either cytokines or hormones, right? They stimulate hematopoiesis. Some of them stimulates proliferation and activation of neutrophilic granulocytes, and some stimulates the production of oxygen carrying red blood cells from the bone marrow. Okay, mostly they are helping cancer patients by getting rid of the anemic condition, or increasing the uh, white blood cell population or lymphocyte population. Now, other than cytokines, interferons, hormones, and other proteins, there are antimicrobial peptides that can also be produced and which are being produced using recombinant DNA technology. Okay, so this table shows you different antimicrobial peptides and their sources and which expression system being used for their production. Okay, so see, there are many antimicrobial peptides either obtained from various sources. Okay, human, Bombyx mori, rana, that is American bullfrog, and bungarus, that is a snake, mast cells of hybrid striped sea bass, human, lungworm, potato, even from plants, and chicken, fruits, lilium, then human, and then there are many other sources. Okay, honeybee, right? So these are the antimicrobial peptides which are being sourced from many sources and produced in expression systems like E. coli, Bacillus subtilis, Pichia pastoris, Cordyceps militaris. I have given here the reference from where I have taken this table. So I suggest you to go through this paper and read more about recombinant production of these antimicrobial peptides. There are several ways by which antimicrobial peptides acts on the microbial pathogens. Either they disintegrate the microbial membrane by different mechanisms, or they suppress the pro-inflammatory cytokines once they are inside the host, and they also induce the anti-inflammatory cytokines. So in a way they alter cytokine milieu and suppresses the inflammation and sepsis risk. Okay, and they also induce some chemokines that recruit neutrophils and other white blood cells to activate the innate immunity and for bacterial clearance. Okay, this way these antimicrobial peptides improve healing and reduced scar formation. They also help in recruitment and polarization of T cells, and they also help in differentiation of dendritic cells. So this way antimicrobial peptides play a very important role as a therapeutic agent, and they can be produced by recombinant technology. There are several applications of antimicrobial peptides. Like in this table, as you can see, different antimicrobial peptides are being used for different applications, like preventions of dental caries and the oral cavity caused by the microbial dysbiosis. Okay, and oral mucositis in patients receiving radiotherapy. Okay, for those patients these can be used, and for bacterial and fungal infections in immunocompromised patients, and hard to heal venous leg ulcers. If there are gram positive skin infections, then this synthetic peptidomimetic can be used. And then there are many other clinical situations where uh, different either recombinant or synthetic antimicrobial peptides can be used. Okay, either their formulation is in the oral gel form, oral solutions. They sometimes they are administered intravenously. Okay, topical gels, they are available in many forms. Okay, this particular table shows the antimicrobial peptides under clinical trial. Okay, so if you are interested, you can go to these clinical trial identifiers and see the status and details of these AMP development. Vaccines are also biopharmaceutical products, and recombinant technology has been used for production of vaccines also. As you know, there are different kinds of vaccines: live attenuated vaccines, or we can say live attenuated viral vaccines, inactivated viral vaccines, virus-like particle vaccines, and viral vector vaccines. This description is basically about viral diseases, but other bacterial diseases and other diseases against which vaccines have been raised can they're also live attenuated or inactivated pathogen can be used uh, as vaccines, and then their components like protein or DNA can be used as the, or RNA also can be used as the vaccine candidate. Okay, so so you see, other than live attenuated, uh, other vaccines like inactivated virus vaccine, virus-like particle, viral vector vaccines, or subunit vaccines falls into the category of recombinant biopharmaceuticals, because they can be designed in such a way where you know uh, recombinant DNA technology is used. If you see that this virus-like particles, what are virus-like particles? These are recombinant particles that mimic or that behave like and show the overall structure of a virus, but they lack infectious genetic material. So they will be immunogenic, but they won't cause any infection. Okay, and then viral vector vaccines. These are also recombinant viruses that present antigen of a given pathogen. They are also non-pathogenic and are can be either replicative or non-replicative. So it is dependent completely on the developer, vaccine developer, whether he or she chooses to make a replicative or non-replicative viral vector vaccine. And these vaccines have increasingly been used for gene therapy applications also. Okay, so this way, recombinant biopharmaceutical is not limited to just monoclonal antibodies, cytokines, and hormones, but also to it expands to vaccines also. So here you are seeing different approaches of vaccine development. Okay, like if we talk about the viral vaccine or the vaccine against the viral infections, there can be a whole inactivated virus where the virus is no more active, so it won't replicate in the patient's body. And then we have live attenuated virus, so its pathogenicity is reduced. Okay, and then we have virus like particles, so it resembles exactly like the virus, but it lacks the genomic genetic material, so it will be just immunogenic material uh, once used as a vaccine. Then the part of the genome of the virus can be inserted into the recombinant bacterial vectors that ultimately will deliver this antigen into the host, where immune system will react against it and provide the protection to the patient. And then we have DNA, that is which carries the viral genes that ultimately will be uh, you know transcribed and translated, and proteins raised will be immunogenic to provide the protection against the viral infection. And then we can have recombinant viral vectors where a different virus is used, which is non-pathogenic and carries a gene of the this pathogenic virus. And then there are recombinant subunit viral proteins where only viral proteins are used as vaccine. So these proteins will be produced in the recombinant system, like recombinant bacteria or recombinant yeast or any animal cell line or even plants. Okay, and then an additional type of vaccine is use of synthetic peptides originating from the viral proteins, which are highly immunogenic. Okay, so these can also be used as the vaccine candidate, and this also falls under the recombinant approach of vaccine development. Here this table shows you different classes of cells or different type of host system that can be used for production of recombinant vaccines, like mammalian system, insect cell line, microbial systems, fungal and even avian cell lines can be used for production of either live attenuated, inactivated, or recombinant viral vaccines, okay, or any other vaccine, okay, like mammalian vero cell lines, Chinese hamster ovary cell line, or Median Darby canine kidney cell lines in case of mammalian system, and then Spodoptera Frugipeda cell lines, high five cell lines, E. coli in case of microbial system, Streptococcus, Clostridium neisseria. These all can be used for production of vaccine candidates. Like in case of fungi, Saccharomyces cerevisiae is the choice. Other than this, there are Pichia pastoris also nowadays. Now, then avian cell lines, we have duck cell lines, and we have different primary chicken embryo cells which can be used for production of different vaccine candidates. Okay, wherever I have used external different sources, whatever I have used, I have given the link or the reference for to go back to that link and to refer the whole article or the paper in detail. Okay, so if you feel need to refer that, you please go and see that reference so that you can understand it in a very much better way. Other than vaccines, there are many anti-cancer recombinant biopharmaceuticals which have been approved. This list show actually which are approved until March 2015, because this data has been taken from a paper published in 2016. So it gives you the details of the products or biopharmaceutical approved until March 2015. So there are different drugs which are their biological role is of either being cytokine or a growth factor or even monoclonal antibodies. Okay, so these are there is a huge number of these such drugs which are used in cancer therapy or cancer treatment. This is again some examples of recently approved biopharmaceuticals with their expression hosts. See, their approval came in 2016, 17, 18, like that. So there are they are expressed in different types of host cells. They are mammalian cell lines, prokaryotic system, embryonated egg system, okay, and different manufacturers like Bayer, Samsung, Biogen, Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, Pfizer, Janssen, Sandoz, Amgen, AstraZeneca, Sanofi. Many companies are being involved in research and approval of these recombinant biopharmaceuticals recently approved. Here I have taken an example of design of the recombinant drugs. Two examples are being taken here. One shows you this denileukin diffiditox, which is a recombinant protein, and it is composed of two toxins, toxin A and toxin B fragments fused with the interleukin 2. Okay, so in case of cancer therapy, these cancer cells expressing IL-2 receptor will this recombinant protein, once administered as a drug, will bind to the IL-2 receptor, okay, where these toxins coming from the Corynebacterium diphtheria, okay, will this toxin will be internalized, and this toxin will exert its effect and promote the and it will cause the cell death in a targeted manner by suppressing the protein synthesis. Likewise, we have another recombinant protein, ZIV aflibercept, where you see these receptors. Receptors are being attached to the Fc region of the IgG. What are these receptors? These are receptors for vascular endothelial growth factors. Okay, so these two receptors are being fused with the constant that is Fc region of the human IgG1 immunoglobulin. Now, because in cancer tumors and all, this angiogenic processes are always problematic, and we want to stop that. So once the endothelial growth factor or this placental growth factor will bind to these receptor, they will act as a decoy. Okay, and they will quench the ligand in a way, and they will stop the angiogenesis. So this way, a very specific, very targeted therapeutic product is being produced as a recombinant biopharmaceutical. Now we will have a look at what are disadvantages and advantages of using different expression systems for production of therapeutic proteins. Okay, so when we use bacterial systems, always we have an advantage that we have well characterized cell lines. Okay, like E. coli, for example, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, Pichia pastoris, we have well characterized cell lines. Okay, and they are very there are simple and very cost effective growth conditions available and known for these microbes. Okay, and we have optimized growth procedures, so we need not to invest so much time to optimize the process, and above all these are scalable. So from lab to pilot or industrial scale, you can scale it very easily, and these systems are very amenable or easy to genetically engineer, and they have very short doubling time, so production time scale is very less, so you can produce good quantities in a shorter time. And there are existing approval regulatory approval systems available for these microbial systems. The only disadvantage with bacterial systems, I did mention Saccharomyces and Pichia pastoris also, but these are not bacterial, they are yeast systems. But if we talk about microbial, they can also be included here. And then disadvantages are that they cannot glycosylate the proteins the way human cells glycosylate. So post translational modification in terms of glycosylation is not the same as of the Pichia pastoris or Saccharomyces cerevisiae. In case of either E. coli, bacterial system doesn't have that glycosylation, but when we talk about Pichia pastoris and Saccharomyces, they do glycosylate the proteins, but not the way that is done in human cells. So always there are disadvantages associated with glycosylation. And then there are protein which are larger in size. They sometimes misfold, and there are issues related to the export of these proteins outside the cell. But overall, as the advantages are much more than the disadvantages, these are the systems of choice for therapeutic protein expression. Then there are insect cell lines being used extensively for recombinant therapeutics production. So, what are the advantages associated with insect cell lines are that the protein expression levels are quite high, and they are also scalable, and they have the ability to produce complex eukaryotic protein with a proper folding, and they won't be problems like insolubility or lack of post translation modification as is there in the microbial system. Then there are, in case of insect cell lines also, there are existing regulatory approval systems, so that is also not a problem. The disadvantages of the using insect cell lines is that non-human glycosylation. Okay, so there may be sometimes addition of immunogenic sugars. So humanized pattern or humanized glycosylation is required because glycosylation affects the immunogenicity of any protein. So if we have human-like glycosylation, then they will be more accepted, okay, by the immune system, and any immune reaction won't be launched against those proteins. And the same thing that sometimes unwanted protein translation post translation modification occur in the proteins expressed in the insect cell lines. Okay, so these are the advantages and disadvantages associated with insect cell lines. Let us talk about mammalian cell line now. See, mammalian cell line have the best advantage of correct post translational modification. It will be most close as to the that of the human cell lines or human cells, and protein yields are satisfactory in case of mammalian cell lines also. And many current products give precedent to regulatory bodies. Okay, so that is also helpful. Then active research and industry funding is there in case of producing therapeutics in mammalian cell lines. Again, there is existing established regulatory approval system. The problem with the mammalian cell lines are that they have very complex growth requirements that raises the cost of production. Okay, and then complex cells hinder engineering, so they are not very amenable to engineering. Okay, and sometimes we get heterologous products, and there is a risk of having human pathogen contamination. Okay, so we need to be very careful while dealing with the mammalian cell lines, that there should be no contamination of the cell lines. And many a times they are difficult to maintain. There is They are unstable. Okay, and of course the production time scales are much higher as compared to the microbial systems, and they are not as easy to scale up as the bacterial cells or microbial cells are. So these are the few advantages and disadvantages associated with the different systems, expression systems. Other than microbial, insect and mammalian cell lines, we can use plants or whole animals and yeast and filamentous fungi for the production of therapeutics, recombinant therapeutics. In case of plants, we can have maximum scale up possibility. Very low growth cost will be there, and complex proteins can be produced because these are eukaryotic systems, and there will be very less chance of contamination with the human pathogen. So that wise it is safe, and we already have optimized growth procedures for plant cells, cell lines, or tissue culture techniques are well established. Okay, now the disadvantages are that again related to the glycosylation, and there is a lack of regulatory approvals related to the plants. Okay, in terms of production of the therapeutics. And when we use whole animals, so while we have the massive scaling up potential, and we have correct post translation we can have correct post translational modifications easily. We can harvest the proteins, we can optimize the farming techniques, animal farming techniques. Okay, and there will be not much cost involved, and there are well established regulatory approval methods or protocols. The problems associated with using whole animal for the production of recombinant protein is that it is difficult and very laborious to create the transgenic organism at the very first place. Once you have the transgenic organism, then the things become easier. Then long production time scale, see, okay, and then there are ethical issues, regulatory issues, and then you will have to characterize the protein product, and then there will be low control on the protein levels and production system. So these are the few disadvantages with using whole animals. Now comes the yeast and filamentous fungi. These have many advantages of being microbial systems. They are simple and cheap to grow. Okay, fast growth rates, high densities. There are again well characterized cell lines, optimized growth procedures, and they are scalable. Okay, they are amenable to genetic engineering, and they allow the protein folding and processing, solubility and everything will be there. And definitely short time scale, you can produce high titers or high enzyme, high yields, and you have very stable strains, and again the very established regulatory approval methods and protocols. The problem associated with these yeast and filamentous fungi is also that the non-human glycosylation that might uh, make the protein or the drug immunogenic. Okay, so that if that nowadays people have overcome these problem also by engineering the glycosylation system in these yeast and filamentous fungi. So different modified strains are there that can glycosylate the proteins in the way it is glycosylated in humans. Okay, so now that problem is more or less overcome by the genetic engineering platform. I have taken a very simple example here for the production of the tissue plasminogen activator. Okay, here you first transfect the CHO cell lines, that is Chinese hamster ovary cell lines, with the gene of tissue plasminogen activator. Once you have the recombinant cell line, you clone it and select it on the antibiotic that you incorporated along with the gene of interest. And once you have selected the recombinant pure cell line, then you can go for the bioreactor production of the protein or therapeutics in the bioreactor, where you will be controlling all the cultivation conditions, media conditions, everything, and then you can harvest the culture soup and purify the protein, and then it can be formulated for further use. Okay, and then just to brief you about the function of plasminogen activator. So what it does actually, this tissue plasminogen activator creates or activates the make plasmin out of plasminogen, and which acts on the fibrin, and then fibrin is degraded and clots are removed. Okay, so that is how it is help in removing the clots and treating the disease. A truncated version is nowadays more preferred over the intact protein, because the truncated tissue plasminogen activator has better effectiveness in clinical setting, because it is not inhibited by plasminogen activator inhibitor. So this tissue truncated version is now used for drug formulation. Okay, so this is all about recombinant therapeutics. So now we will be discussing, um, gene therapy in our next lecture. So if you have any doubts, students, go ahead.